Okay. Hey y'all, my name is Kayla and welcome to my cozy chaotic corner of the internet. Today's video is going to be a little different than our usual ones. It's a pseudo reading vlog slash thriller review situation. Let me know what you guys think of this format. I kind of like it. I want to switch it up like a scotch. I want to make it a little more vloggy, but maybe that's not your jam. Maybe you like that it's just me reacting to the book in various states of being. So yeah, let me know in the comments down below. And while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And with that, I have also introduced a new way of rating books. So Kayla is going to talk about that. And again, I'm just curious if you guys like this format, because if you like this format, I like this format. It was kind of fun. It was a little different. So yeah, with that noted, let's hang out with past Kayla. What we will be rating off of is it's going to be 1 to 5 for each category. So we have characters, we have writing, we have plot, we have originality, we have rereadability, emotional impact, resolution, and then we have pacing and enjoyment. So enjoyment is kind of like that initial knee-jerk reaction of like, this is a 5-star book. And like all the other categories are gonna be there to balance out like the reality of the rating system. I'm currently like 40% of the way through Love Letters to a Serial Killer. And so far, the story is about a woman who just recently got fired from a job, just recently found out she's in a situationship, and the dude now has a official girlfriend. And there was a serial killer, and she's now writing to the guy suspected of being the serial killer. Here's the thing, the guy suspected of being the serial killer, and in these letters, he's not like admitting guilt, but he's also not denying guilt, and he's from a very wealthy family, and he has, what do I want to say about this? Pretty much I'm treating this book like a whodunit. I don't think he's the serial killer. I think someone else is the serial killer. But our main character, she's from Minnesota, and the killer, William, is in Georgia. Initially, I was like, maybe it was Max who was her situationship. But then I was like, no, that doesn't make sense because he's in Minnesota and the killings were in Georgia. But yeah, I have a theory. And if I'm right, I'll be like excited, but also like kind of upset that I was right this early on in the book. I was right. That's kind of annoying that I called it right off the rip, but I was right. I figured that while I make my coffee this morning, I could talk to you guys about, like, it might be the dumbest qualm I have with a book, but I think it's valid. So Love Letters to a Serial Killer takes place in 2 locations, 2 real life actual factual locations in the United States. And a part of me is like, am I noticing this because it's taking place in Minneapolis, Minnesota? I'm from Minnesota. I'm from St. Paul. And I do have a general understanding of Minneapolis because it's literally right across the river from St. Paul. And now I'm like, I wonder if this happens in a lot of books, or if I'm only noticing it in books that are based in the Twin Cities. So here's my qualm, is that the author says that this book takes place in Minnesota and in Georgia. But to be so totally for real with you, and this might be to longevity's sake, to make the book last longer than maybe some locations may last, but nothing, like there's no geographical markers mentioned in the book at all. And when I say geographical markers, because for sure at least the first third of the book takes place in Minneapolis, no place is actually referenced. No restaurant, no hotel, no location. Like the only thing that's actually referenced is the fact that they're in Minneapolis. They don't say where she actually works. She works for a nonprofit. They don't say which nonprofit. They don't say what building she works in. They don't say what restaurant she's stopping at. They don't say what bar she's going to. It's just like, I went to this bar, I went to work, I work for a nonprofit, but there's no like specificity to any of it. And then when we're in, this is the wild part, guys. And then when we're in Georgia, I can't recall if it was ever determined what exact town in Georgia we're in. We're just in Georgia. But again, it's the same thing where it's like there's no specificity. It's mentioned, oh, I went to one of those chain coffee shop. I mean, we could all assume it's Starbucks, but there's quite a few large chain coffee shops in the world. We went to a steakhouse that I could never afford. But then the craziest part is there was some actual brand names mentioned, and it was like a hotel chain. I don't remember the exact hotel. And then Outback Steakhouse. And I'm just like, did they pay you to name drop them? Because those things, I mean, obviously the hotel name didn't stand out that much, but those things stood out so much because nothing else had a name. All the bars were just bars, or the old bar, the dive bar that a bunch of older people went to, newer hip bar, the indie coffee shop, the big chain coffee shop. I think Starbucks actually was mentioned. Or maybe that's just me assuming Starbucks was mentioned. Because one of the characters in the book was like, I'm going to Starbucks with this one dude to talk about becoming a lawyer potentially. But yeah, it was just so weird. And it just like, again, I don't know if I'm noticing this type of stuff in books that specifically have connections to Minnesota, and specifically the Twin Cities, because I'm like, I have a general understanding of the Twin Cities, or if this happens in a lot of books and I've just never noticed it before. Because one of my big qualms with Just for the Summer was that it took place in Minneapolis, well, not just Minneapolis, but like Minneapolis, Minnetonka, not Minnetonka, I think Wayzata, I can't remember. It was by Lake Minnetonka. Anyways, like it's taking place in the Twin Cities, and like sure, the Stone Arch Bridge was mentioned and a few other things were mentioned, but I don't know, it just felt like there was lack of description of the area. And I felt like specifically that book was a little dependent on its setting. Yeah, I don't know. If anyone knows why there's a lack of description when it comes to real places, let me know. Because like you have these fantasy books that will go into the nitty-gritty details of what the door looked like. But when it comes to stuff that's more contemporary, it's like, oh yeah, we went to the cute little indie coffee shop on the corner. And I'm like, just pick an actual coffee shop, name drop, okay? Jesus. That was one of my grievances with this book. I have a few others, but like all my other grievances would be spoilers. So I'm going to like sit down and chit chat with you guys about this book and all the other books, but we'll do that a little later on. This book was, the thing is, okay, so this book had such an interesting premise. I think the biggest reason this book didn't really meet expectation was because I guessed the ending so early on in the book. But with all that noted, let's just hop into my ratings for each of our categories. So for characters, I gave it a 3. I felt like they were just kind of like meh. Nothing about any of these characters really stood out in a way that I was like, oh my god, this is so wild and new and fresh, and like I've never hung out with characters. Like they just felt like normal people in just a very obscure situation. Writing, I gave it a 5. I actually really enjoyed the writing style of Tasha Coryell. It was witty. We all know Kayla likes simple writing. If it's easy to understand and I don't have to try and reread a sentence 20 million times, like that is perfection for me. So I just really enjoyed the writing style. For plot, I gave it a 4. Again, I thought like the overall concept of the book and the structure of the book was interesting. I think once we got into like the intricacies of what was actually going on though, not sure how I felt about it. But like from beginning, middle to end, it did have an overall like decent flow. Originality, I gave this a 4 because to me, I've never heard of a book like this. I've never read a book like this. Like, it does have a very unique and original idea behind it. I think it, again, my biggest thing is like the execution and the fact that I was able to solve the case so quickly. Rereadability, and this is actually the category that dropped our numbers down so low. For rereadability, I gave it a 1. Like, nothing about this book, like, I have zero interest in rereading this book at all. Will I keep it on my shelves? For now, yes. Down the road, who knows? I don't. But yeah, I gave it a 1. I was just like, eh. Emotional impact, I gave it a 3. I gave it a 3 because okay, when you hear emotional impact, sometimes you may think I'm sitting here sobbing or like screaming my head off, right? And I feel like the reason I would give a book a 5 under emotional impact is because it made me feel an extreme emotion one way or the other, which is why this is a 3. I was invested in kind of what was going on until I wasn't invested in what was going on. I wasn't overly attached to any characters, but I did want what was best for everyone involved, you know? Resolution. I gave this book a 2 for resolution. I was not a fan of how this book ended, and I'm not gonna spoil it for you guys. We all know I've spoiled endings of books in the past because of how much I despised the ending. West Heart Kill. For Love Letters to a Serial Killer, I was just kind of like, really? Really? Pacing, I gave it a 5. At no point did it feel like it was going too fast. At no point did it feel like it was going too slow. I thought the pacing actually was probably one of the best qualities of this book because it just kind of kept the ball rolling. And I think in mysteries, you need to keep the ball rolling. And that brings us to overall enjoyment. I gave it a 3. I felt like it was just kind of like an average book. It wasn't the greatest thing I've ever read. It also wasn't the worst thing I've ever read. I just was like, yeah, that was a book that I consumed and it was all right, which gives it a final rating of 3.33. Okay, y'all, so I am currently reading Drowning by T.J. Newman. I just started chapter 3. I'm listening to the audiobook, and here are my thoughts and opinions so far. If you don't know what this book is about, Drowning is about an airplane that crashes and sinks into the ocean, and it's a wild ride of a thriller where we find out if the people on the plane make it out alive or not. So far, what has happened? First and foremost, wait, rewind. The book literally starts out, chapter 1, the crash is occurring. Like, it goes straight into the deep end right off the bat. Not literally in the deep end, because I think they don't actually, like, start sinking in the water until chapter 2. But it's, like, right off the rip. Shit's going south. Initially, it starts out, I don't remember any of the character names, and that's gonna be one of my points here in a second, but initially it starts out from the point of view of a man who I believe is an engineer, and he is also a father, and he's on a flight with his daughter, and they're going to Hawaii, or they were planning on going to Hawaii. The plane's engine starts malfunctioning shortly after takeoff. Like, they haven't even hit full altitude, like they haven't evened out yet. That's great. Don't know why they didn't discover that during the safety checks, but whatever. The way the engine is malfunctioning, they apparently can't turn the plane around to get back to safety. So there's actually this one very sentimental moment where the captain of the ship, of the plane, is talking to air control, and they're all pretty much on the same page of like, yeah, we aren't making it back, guys. Our main perspective so far has been mostly from this father, but it does also then jump around all the other passengers and crew on the plane. I keep wanting to say ship because they're in the water, but it's not a ship. They're on a plane. It kept hopping around. I feel like every single paragraph, it was hopping around to a different person and kind of how they were interacting with the situation. And I didn't love that. It was almost too much. Like, I almost would prefer every chapter it changes, or maybe like even every, like, section in a chapter. I don't know. But it is kind of jarring to kind of be bouncing around from a different person to a different person to a different person, and then having all these names introduced to you, and I'm just like, I don't even know. The only person's name who I know for sure are 3 of the people. There is Kit, who was the second pilot on the ship. There was Molly, who is one of the flight attendants, and then there's Kahula, who I believe is also another one of the flight attendants. Those are literally the only names I remember in this story so far. I'm sure I'll remember more as the story goes on, but those are the 3 I know for sure. I'm like 40% of the way through, and there was a moment that just happened. I'm laughing, but I'm also crying because it's only 40% of the way through. How much shit is gonna go south in the next 60% of this book? Because right here, you're thinking, oh my god, they're gonna be saved. Everything's good. Hey, it's me again, literally like a minute later. So that great happy news we just got, yeah, disaster's about to strike, because we just discovered that the plane, the submerged plane, is on a cliff. They're currently pretty high in the water, but they're on a cliff and they could plummet further down, which is going to make this rescue mission a gabillion times more difficult if that happens. Y'all drowning. I have notes. Let me grab my notes for this book. I wrote something down specifically about this book that I feel says it all. This was such a beautiful, thrilling, and tragic story of loss, but more importantly, of love. I also want to acknowledge something about this book. The day I finished this book, which is kind of very chilling, because this book is about a plane crash into the Pacific Ocean, was the same day that the American Airlines plane hit the Black Hawk in Washington, D.C. and fell into the Potomac. And it was so bizarre to read a book that oddly aligned with reality. I gave my ratings and everything before I had heard about the tragedy that occurred in Washington, D.C., but I would feel remiss not to mention and acknowledge the horrific accident, because while the knowledge of that does not impact my feeling about this story at all, I feel like it just adds an additional layer and heaviness and reality to this story. I just wanted to acknowledge the loss of so many lives that happened that day. With that noted, I love this book, and I think we're going to realize that with my ratings for these categories. Characters, I would say 5. Every character was so unique and different, and they all had their own voice and personality, which I absolutely loved. Writing style, I'm going to give it a 5. Plot, we're going to give it a 5. Let's be real, y'all. This is going to be 5 across the board for Drowning. Like, it was so good. It was so good. Originality, I mean, I've never consumed anything like this, especially because oftentimes thrillers are just there to have like this heightened experience of just like, oh my god, what the F is going on? But like, this thriller was so different in the sense of like, yeah, sure, I've cried during thrillers before, but I've never had so much of like an emotional reaction to the entire situation, all of the characters involved, all of the things that happened, like, and it just ended so good. Readability, even though I know exactly how it ends and everything that happens, easily I would read this again. Emotional impact, 5, obviously, like, I would give it more than 5 if I could. Resolution, 5, oh my god, like, y'all, the way this book ended, no matter which direction it ended, it would have been a 5, but, like, how it ended was just perfect. It was so perfect. Pacing, 5. There was never a moment where I was bored. It was just like on the edge of your seat the entire time. And then enjoyment, 5. That was my knee-jerk reaction. That is a 5.0 across the board. Very first 5-star read of 2025. And I loved it. I loved every moment of it. And if you haven't heard anyone recommend this book to you before, I highly encourage you to check out Drowning. It's a quick book, but it is an impactful book. The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell. Libby Jones inherits a mansion in London, only to discover its dark past, where a wealthy family was found dead and a mysterious group had taken over the house. As she uncovers the disturbing secrets of her birth parents, she realized the past isn't as buried as she thought. I just looked and I'm at the 25% mark and I am still so confused. Like, I feel like I'm just listening to background noise at this point. And the funny thing is I'm paying attention. I'm trying to pay attention. And it's just so confusing. And I've been like kind of also referencing the actual book to see maybe am I confused because I'm listening to the audiobook, but when I'm reading along in the physical book, I'm still confused. I'm still so lost in the sauce. There are so many, oh my god, hold on, I need to look. There are so many characters, so many different like time, not even different time hops. There's only like one big time hop. I'm thinking that this is set in current time, and then we're also like jumping back to like the late 80s, early 90s. And I'm just like, I just need like a family tree or like a plot of characters, because right now I have a bunch of names swirling around in my head, but do I know their connections to anything? Oh, I'm so confused. I just needed to let you guys know that I'm very, very confused about this book, and it's really actually frustrating me at this point, because I feel like by the 25% mark, I should at least have like some understanding of what is going on, and I don't. So for The Family Upstairs, I gave the characters a 5. I actually really enjoyed all of the characters. There wasn't a single character that I felt like they fell flat. Every single character had their own storyline, had their own personality, and I really, really enjoyed that. Honestly, one of my favorite characters, his name was Justin, and while he was in the book for what felt like a blink of an eye, he really had like such a personality and such an impact that clearly I enjoyed him and I remember him. For writing, I gave it a 4. I gave it a 4 because while I really enjoyed the writing, this kind of goes into the plot as well of why I gave, spoiler alert, I gave plot a 4. So I'm going to kind of like speak to both the writing and the plot, and why I gave it a 4 instead of giving it a 5 is because literally the first 25% of this book, I was so lost and confused and I had no idea really what was going on. I was so confused, and the only reason I knew that we were getting 3 different character perspectives throughout this book was because they had 3 different voice actors doing the 3 different characters. So it made it very obvious that we had perspective shifts. And even then, I'm so confused. Don't get me wrong, I understand that mysteries and thrillers and stuff like that, they should be, you know, slightly elusive. You're not going to get the full story right off the rip. But it was to the point where I was getting frustrated and I wanted to like just stop and put the book down. I'm really glad that I didn't, because I actually really enjoyed this book. But that's why I gave writing and plot a 4, because there was just, I don't know if the writing could have been better. I don't know if the plot could have been better. I don't know if I would have enjoyed it more if I really understood what was going on in the first quarter of the book. But it was very frustrating to be so lost in the sauce. Originality, 5. I've never consumed anything like this. I thought it was really fun and interesting and unique. Rereadability, I give a 5. And the reason I gave it a 5, for most mysteries and thrillers, I won't give it a 5 for rereadability, because I feel like the best part of mysteries and thrillers is the whodunit, the twist, the like, oh my god, the realization. And I think, honestly, as frustrated as I was of not really understanding what was going on in the first quarter of the book, I want to reread it to see if I can, if I went to read it a second time, would I understand what was going on in that first quarter now that I've like read the entire story, or would I still be like, I'm still kind of lost? Emotional impact. I gave emotional impact a 4. There were times where I was frustrated, I was annoyed, I think I got a little misty. Like, honestly, y'all, I probably cry during every single book I read, to be so totally for real with you. The older I get, the more I can cry at the drop of a hat. But while I did feel things, it wasn't like just punch you in the face emotional. Resolution, I actually really enjoyed in this book. And if you read this book, you may be like, what? It left on a pseudo cliffhanger. There is a second book for this one. Do I feel like you have to read the second book? No. I honestly think like a good mystery kind of leaves loose ends. It leaves you thinking and wanting. And I actually really enjoyed that about The Family Upstairs. The ending was so perfect because it's from the perspective of our character, Henry. Throughout the entire book, like, he presents himself as this good-hearted, amazing person, but the rest of the characters throughout the book present him as slightly devious, slightly problematic. There's just something about him that feels unsettling. The final chapter, from his perspective, turns the key and says, yes, there is something unsettling about me. And I loved it. I loved that ending. Pacing, I actually gave a 3 because, again, the beginning part. I was so lost. I was so confused. I also feel like while the book, everything tied into each other in the end, right? But I feel like sometimes there were certain instances that we spent too long on. There were other instances that we didn't spend enough time on. So overall, I would say the pacing was average, but I think it could have been better. And then overall enjoyment, I love this book. It was a 5. Like, loved it so much. It was so enjoyable. I had such a good time with it, even with the frustration of the first quarter of the book. That's the crazy part, y'all. The first section or a part of a book can be like, not sure how I'm feeling about this, but if at the end I'm just like so excited, I had such a good time, it's gonna be a 5-star. So 5 is gonna be 5 for enjoyment for me, which gives us a final rating of 4.44 for The Family Upstairs. I'm literally just about to start the audiobook for You Are Fatally Invited, and the introduction was introducing who the narrators are, and it's a full cast, and I'm so excited. I love when audiobooks have a full cast. Oh my gosh, if this is anything like Horror Story, we all know I was obsessed with the audiobook of Horror Story. Oh my god, I'm so excited. So excited. I wish I had the physical copy of this book now because I love referencing a good map. Oh my god, it's literally like the board game Clue. I'm loving this book so far. This is very much giving like Clue whodunit vibes. Do you want to say hi to people? Do you want to say hi? Do it. The people are right here. They're out the window. Hi. Do you guys want to sit outside? Yes, 1 second. Okay, I'm 18% of the way into You're Fatally Invited. And I'm not sure how I feel about it right now because so far it's feeling similar to West Heart Kill, which if you don't know, I hated that book. And it's feeling that way just because I feel like you're being told a lot, but also it's trying to leave room for illusion, but it's just kind of like frustrating with how much you're being told. Also, the full cast of characters, it's just each character has a different voice for their specific chapter. So it's not like one person's talking, then another person's, like, the dialogue doesn't interchange between the cast of characters. It just, every chapter perspective has a different voice. So yeah, I really don't know how I feel about You're Fatally Invited. As of right now. I might feel a little different once we get more character perspectives. To start, we only really got 2 characters' perspectives, and now we're just getting a 3rd one by like the 18% mark. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about this book. I'm really hoping I like it because I love a good whodunit, but I don't know if this is the whodunit for me. Y'all, I want to tell you what's going on in this book, but I fear if I tell you what's going on in this book, I will spoil it. So just know, I don't even want to say that. I was about to say, like, just know you're looking out for X amount of bad guys. I guess there's more than one bad guy in this book. And I have a hunch I know who most of the bad guys are, but I kind of want to be wrong because I'm like 65% of the way into this book, and I would hate to be, I as much as I love whodunits and mysteries, I like being surprised at the big reveal. I like being like, oh my god, or I like figuring out right before we're about to get the reveal. But so far, I'm actually really enjoying this. I know initially I was like, I'm not sure how I'm feeling about this narration style, but like the further you get into the book, like the more the more it makes sense, and the more I actually appreciate the character hopping that we're getting. Because if you guys know me, I'm not the biggest fan of character hopping, but so far I'm appreciating it very much so in this book. For characters, I gave Your Fatally Invited a 5. I thought it had such a wide array of characters for a cast. I mean, if you're gonna do a Clue-esque book, you kind of have to have very different characters, and this book definitely had that. I know I kind of like started out saying that this book kind of felt odd to me in its structure, but the more it went on, the more it went on. For writing, I did give it a 4. For plot, I did give it a 4. Originality, okay, so for originality, I did give that a 3 because, let's be real, this is like every other whodunit Clue style book, right? You're staying in a mansion, there's hidden passageways, there's pointing fingers at other people are winding up dead. I think like the one thing that is interesting about this book versus other Clue-esque stories that I've read in the past is that typically there's kind of like one death and that's it. This book had so many people keeling over left, right, and center, okay? Rereadability, I gave this a 4. Let's be real, I don't really reread books, okay? But how enticed was I by this book to reread it? I'd give it a 4. I'd be interested to delve in this again now with a new perspective to see also when it comes to like mystery thrillers, it's always interesting to kind of like find little Easter eggs or little clues that you may not have noticed before on the rereads. Emotional impact, I gave this a 3. I didn't really feel strong emotions one way or another. It was just like, nah. For resolution, I gave Your Fatally Invited a 4. I thought it was interesting how it all tied itself together in the end. Also though, I was so annoyed because I can't remember if it was like the final chapter or if it was technically the epilogue, but in the audiobook, it actually had like a full cast of characters. So it had 3 different people talking for the 3 different people. And I was so annoyed because I was like, I really wish we had gotten that experience throughout the entire book. Pacing, I gave it a 5. I thought the pacing was really good. I was never bored. I was always like on the edge of my seat trying to anticipate what was gonna happen next, especially towards, I would say, like once we hit the 40% mark and on, that's when you were like, oh, like things started to pick up and that's when my brain was really ticking and I was really trying to figure out what the heck was going on. And I would say for overall enjoyment of You Are Fatally Invited, it's a 5. It was a 5. I enjoyed it so much as like an entire package, but with that noted, the final rating for You Are Fatally Invited is a 4.11. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. These were some pretty good thrillers. Even like, honestly, was Love Letters to a Serial Killer my favorite book on the planet? No, but I still appreciated it for what it was, and oh my god, Drowning. I need to buy that book. I don't physically own that book, but I need to buy it, and I think that is definitely gonna be a reread for me because it was gorgeous. I loved it so much. As I noted earlier in the video, let me know in the comments down below, do you like this format? What would you change? What wouldn't you change? I'm very intrigued to know your guys' opinion. But with all of that, I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.